Welcome to the Barrett Family Podcast.
I think it's time for the masses to wake up.
Wake up! Featuring the father of chaos, Jason Barrett.
When they think they got the answers, I change the question.
And the Prodigal Son, Dylan Barrett.
Your time is up. My time is now.
Now, coming to you live from the Redwood Drive Arena. Say hello to the Barrett family.
Hello and welcome to the Barrett Family Podcast. I'm Jason Barrett alongside my tag team partner and sidekick, Dylan Barrett. We are going to be with you for the next 20 or so minutes talking about the WWE Draft, Monday Night Raw, SmackDown Live, which just premiered this past Tuesday. A lot to get into in the weeks and months to come as we continue this podcast and introduce other elements such as NXT, Lucha Underground, TNA, and other wrestling components. But before we get into any of the activity of this past week, Dylan, my man, how are you feeling on this first night of the WWE Draft?
I'm feeling great. The draft is finally wrapped up. All the weeks of excitement have finally led to this. I feel like we have two great rosters that we're going to be able to watch. SmackDown actually feels like a show you must have to watch now that they have AJ Styles, John Cena, Dean Ambrose, and etc.
Well, you know, the draft is complete. As we saw, Raw had the majority of picks compared to SmackDown. I think we were in agreement. The first pick, Seth Rollins, was not a surprise whatsoever. And Dean Ambrose being the world champion, you figure he's going to be one of the top two picks. But the draft really seemed to change after that because Charlotte went 3, AJ went 4 to SmackDown, and then Finn Balor, someone I know you have a lot of strong feelings for, went number 5 to Raw. How did you feel about Charlotte, AJ, and Finn in that order?
I was very surprised to see Charlotte go number 3. I thought she was going to be top 10, but not right in the beginning. AJ wasn't a big surprise to me. I thought, him going to SmackDown helps legitimize the brand. Balor, I saw it coming, but I did not think he was going to be a number 5 pick. To be honest, I actually thought he was going to go a little bit earlier.
I'm happy that we finally have Balor coming to Monday Night Raw. I think that's the program he belongs on. What's interesting is that AJ Styles, who was not a member of the WWE, and Finn Balor, who's not been a part of Raw or SmackDown, were taken ahead of Roman Reigns, John Cena, Brock Lesnar, and Randy Orton. I'm just curious, who had the nerve to tell Vince McMahon that this would be the order and got him to sign off on that? Because usually, we know what Vince does. He buries the young guy and he promotes the old guy, and in this case, he didn't do it.
I'm really shocked. I actually didn't think it was going to work out like this. I actually thought Ambrose was going to be first and Cena. Did not think Rollins would be number 1 pick. Styles and Balor being one of those first few picks, together. I was shocked. I really thought they were going to be maybe number 10, 11, something like that. Usually Cena, you always think, oh, okay, he's going to be the number 1 pick. But Styles, Ambrose, Rollins, and Charlotte before him, that's just shocking. And if you look, 4 out of the 5 top picks all came from NXT.
Yeah, which is a great sign. It shows how committed the WWE have been to their young talent. Now, let's talk about a few other developments. Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens remain on the same program, which is good. It allows them to continue building their feud in the future, plus they can feud with a number of other talents as well. I thought it was interesting that they broke up the Wyatt family, which I'm not surprised. At some point, they've got to give Braun Strowman a shot to see what he can do. The tag teams really did not get broken up for the most part. You saw Enzo and Cass stay together, the New Day stay together, the Dudleys stay together. The one really interesting part, though, is that the club were separated. Gallows and Anderson are now on Raw. AJ is now on SmackDown.
You see, I just think it's time to say hello to the Balor Club. I think they're going to push Styles as his own star. Look, in his feud with Cena, he can be boasting about how he was the first pick. But for Balor, now he's got Gallows and Anderson, 2 boys he knew from New Japan. I think it's going to be a beginning of a new club.
Well, here are a couple other things that jumped out. I thought it was good for Baron Corbin to go to SmackDown. I think it gives him a legitimate shot to be built up a little more. I love the selection of American Alpha to SmackDown. And if you look at the way the tag team divisions are on the 2 brands, On Raw, you have a little bit of the older, more physical guys. You've got the Club, the Dudleys, the New Day, right? They have the Golden Truth, which I don't even count as a tag team. It's a joke. But if you look at SmackDown, you've got American Alpha. You've got the Usos. You've got Breezango that we like to call Fabrice. And then the Vaudevillains. And then they drafted Mojo Rawley later in the draft. And they also took Zack Ryder, which tells you they're going to do something with the Hype Bros. And if you look at that, a lot more athletic tag teams. So I thought that was a good selection by SmackDown. A couple others that I want to point out. Nia Jax went to Raw. And you can tell the way athletic tag teams are on SmackDown and physical teams are on Raw. The same holds true with the female talent because you have Charlotte, Paige, Sasha, and Nia Jax all on Raw. I would say
don't forget about Dana Brooke.
Dana Brooke just went there too. Good point. SmackDown, on the other hand, are going with the more athletic but not necessarily the more talented when you've got Eva Marie, Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, Natalya, Naomi. I think that's going to be a harder one to sell. Carmella's a good fit. That's right.
I was actually surprised that SmackDown had drafted her, especially as the last draft pick. I actually thought she was going to go to Raw to reunite with the Enzo and Cass, Just really shocking, but I guess they want to develop her as her own star before they do anything.
Two surprises, not big surprises, but two things I thought would happen that didn't happen. I thought Alberto Del Rio and Darren Young would wind up on the same show. If anyone follows politics, they're well aware of Donald Trump, good or bad. And I figured if you're going to push a guy as make Darren Young great again, you put him against the Mexican star Alberto Del Rio because there's a natural connection there. But they didn't do that. Young's on Raw, Del Rio's on SmackDown. The other one that surprised me is that Kane wound up on SmackDown, and as much as I'd rather not see Kane even in a ring, if you're going to introduce the Demon Finn Balor, I would think you would have him on the same program with the Demon Kane, even if it's just for one of those classic Team Hell No kind of moments where, old Demon trying to give young Demon some wisdom, but they never went that route. So those were two things that surprised me. What were some others that surprised you?
I was surprised that Apollo Crews fell so far in the draft. The same with Vaudevillains. Eric Rowan getting drafted. I know that's kind of a stretch, but I'm surprised since they weren't going with the whole Wyatt family. Like, if you look, I brought up Apollo Crews was drafted later on. He was drafted behind Zack Ryder, The Ascension, Naomi. For Raw, I was surprised to see the club get broken up. Neville, that was interesting to see him come back. Even though he's been out for a while, I wish they had also... I wish they had other people who had been injured get drafted, like Luke Harper, Nikki Bella, who was an obvious exception. But other than that, wasn't surprised about the Lucha Dragons being split up since they had announced it yesterday or before. Actually, Heath Slater wasn't drafted. I get what they're going to do, and it's going to be fun, but I just was surprised they broke up Social Outcasts.
Here's the one thing I thought, as good as the draft was, here's one area where I thought they missed the boat. I understand taking Kalisto, but following him up with Sin Cara, Naomi, Jack Swagger, and The Ascension, in that order, those four go ahead of the Dudleys, Zack Ryder, who's fighting for the U.S. title this Sunday, by the way, Apollo Crews, Braun Strowman, Breezango, the Vaudevillains. All of them have legitimate talent and can be doing something in the future. Some of these talents, when you see Golden Truth go ahead of Titus, who was fighting Rusev and could still be developed, Paige, Darren Young, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I was also just surprised that there was no actual surprise returns. Like, when you watch the draft, everyone's been speculating. Who's coming back? Could we see Shelton Benjamin, Kurt Angle, Jeff Hardy? None of them showed up. We didn't even get, someone small like Kung Fu Naki or Tajiri. I get why that we didn't have someone return, but hey, the draft was just very lackluster in some parts, but good in others.
If there was a loser from this draft, to me, there's one name. And if I give you a name, who's the biggest loser from this draft, who would it be in your opinion?
I would definitely say Heath Slater.
Heath Slater. Mine is Bayley.
Oh, I just forgot that
because,
he had drafted.
Listen, here's the deal. I understand that they've got Asuka down at NXT, and if they're promoting Nia Jax and Alexa and Eva Marie, and Carmella, they need Bayley star power. I totally understand that. But if I'm Bayley, I'm going backstage and saying, listen, before you worry about Carmella, Eva Marie, and all these other girls going up to the main roster when they have not proven they belong on it, explain to me when I've main evented a pay-per-view with Sasha and tore the house down, why I'm not going up to the roster to be part of the mix. Bayley can bring them money that those other girls can't. I didn't understand that.
You see, with Bayley, right? You said she main evented the match with Sasha at, what was it, one of their
NXT
takeovers?
TakeOver, yep.
She also probably had a match in the night over Finn Balor and Kevin Owens in Brooklyn last year. But there's one other thing. So Sasha has her surprise partner. Who's it gonna be? Like, if they don't draft Bayley, can they still bring her up as like a free agent kind of thing? Or do they do that? But I was really surprised. I totally forgot. Plus, if you want someone who's gonna make merchandise and bring you money, Bayley. There's one other person that actually did shock me, though. So, even though he's probably going to be fighting for the NXT title, I was surprised Vince didn't go and look at Shinsuke Nakamura to bring him up. He could have just made a lot of money, but decided, you know what, let's keep him in NXT.
I love Nakamura. I think he belongs on Raw or SmackDown. The reality is his time is going to come in the future. I think right now they need him with Samoa Joe because they're losing Balor. That makes a lot of sense. I'm with you. I think you make a great point when you talk about this Sunday. If they introduce Bayley as Sasha's partner and make it as a free agent acquisition, then I understand why that makes sense. On the other hand, you can look at it just from today's standpoint, and the fact is Bayley could have been drafted, wasn't drafted, so why would she be a big deal as a free agent when you could have drafted her? But that's, not everything they do makes sense. Speaking of, and you're listening to the Barrett Family Podcast, one thing that didn't make sense, and I know we were divided a little bit on it on Monday Night Raw, was Raw announcing Mick Foley as general manager. Now explain your position of why you believe it is or isn't a good move.
Okay, so Mick Foley, he makes no sense with Stephanie unless they're planning to turn him heel, which he's starting to look a little like he's showing signs. But I liked it because it wasn't your typical, and no one thought it was going to be Foley. That's why I liked it. It just has no fit unless they do something to turn him heel. I thought it was going to be like Shawn Michaels, where he's got ties with Stephanie, he's got ties with Triple H, has ties with Vince. I thought it was going to be him. They could have brought Eric Bischoff back, but he decided that he wasn't going to do it after announcing on Twitter last week. Let's see, who else could have they brought? Paul Heyman, he could have done it. I knew it was not going to be any of the people who showed up on Raw putting their name in a hat. You knew it wasn't going to be them.
Here's the thing, and you just said it. I like the fact that there was some surprise. I'll give them that. The issue I have is Mick Foley's whole career, he's been a face. And Daniel Bryan is the ultimate face on SmackDown. Usually when you have GMs going opposite one another, you want there to be a natural rivalry, which you don't get with Mick Foley and Daniel Bryan. Mick Foley also was retired by Triple H, who is married to Stephanie. There has always been this friction between Mick Foley and Triple H, so Mick Foley all of a sudden working for Stephanie seems really silly in my opinion. And the other part of it is, this was an opportunity where they could have done something wild. They could have signed Kurt Angle and announced him as the GM if they wanted to. They could have brought in someone like Ric Flair, who had a connection to Triple H. They could have even had the guts to go out and bring in Hulk Hogan, which would have shocked people. Instead, they went with Mick Foley, who is adding a television show on their network. And so I just felt like it was kind of forced, even though it is probably better than some of the other options that we could have had.
You see, you brought it up. Mick Foley's got his show with the network. That's probably why they brought him. So he can promote the network, help promote his show, and get people to subscribe to it. That's probably just there so he can make money and stuff. But you brought up how Daniel Bryan and Mick Foley don't have a good, feud. If you look back at general managers, they always have had feuds. You've had Stephanie and Eric Bischoff and Heyman. It's always been a good feud.
Yep.
This, I don't know how it's going to work out. It's definitely better than what they could have done. It just really shocks me.
Other notes I want to point out from Raw. If someone listening to this can let us know what purpose Byron Saxton serves on a commentary team, please. I welcome the feedback. The other points that I want to bring up, The 12-man tag, I thought, was the best part of Raw.
Oh, big time.
You had New Day, Enzo and Cass, and Cena against the Club and the Wyatts. The promos were outstanding. A couple of the lines that jumped out were when Enzo said, Luke Gallows, the only time a woman opens her mouth for you is when they yawn. When Carl Anderson was called the Times New Roman font because he's just that boring. But then also when Anderson was making the point about chemistry being important, and he said, me and the Club and AJ, great chemistry. Myself and my hot Asian wife, chemistry. And then how about the New Day? We like to, beat things. They just like to beat things up. Speaking of jerks, which was hysterical.
That was a great line. So there's just been that Raw had excellent promo work from without. Like if you looked in the beginning of the show, it started off with strong lines like Stephanie, B+ player for a B+ show to Daniel Bryan. Shane had to marry a WWE superstar to become relevant. It's just all great promo work throughout the night. Even the New Day's Pokemon Go joke.
Yes.
The only thing I don't like sometimes with the WWE and their promos, and even the announcers will do it, is where they'll try to make hints to like modern kids, like how, if you heard during SmackDown, Mauro Ranallo was using the word lit, which I'm just like, okay, just no, you're not going to be Instagram or Vine or anything. Just stick to how you were. It was just, they had good promo work on Raw, but they always had those moments.
The other promo that was very underrated was Seth Rollins in the arena with no one around. That promo, cutting it up on Ambrose and Reigns, was outstanding. It shows why Rollins is one of the best. The biggest blunder, though, of the show. The program ends with both men's shoulders pinned. It's clear to anyone watching that nobody won the match. And you have Stephanie declare Rollins champion. And the WWE, how Michael Cole, when I talked about Byron Saxton not serving a purpose, here's a perfect opportunity where Saxton can actually do something since Michael Cole screwed up. And say, by the way, don't forget, you can watch the conclusion of this on the WWE Network. All they had to do was say that, or this hasn't been settled. Tune in right now to the WWE Network to find out what happens. And they didn't say it. Thankfully, I went on Twitter, and somebody had pointed out to me that the decision was reversed. Ambrose was remaining champion. I'm just thinking to myself, how many people didn't go to Twitter, didn't watch the network, and until tonight had no idea that Dean Ambrose was still champion, which is bad.
You see, you bring that up. I found out through Instagram, seeing someone comment on another person's page, thinking, wait, they did it on the network? You're kidding, right? How do you, not announce that on Raw? The only thing I could see that happen was, A, Michael Cole screwed up, which definitely is the case here, or USA pulled the plug too early on the show, but I don't think they would have done that. It was just a very messed up ending to Raw. It was more messed up than the Fatal 4-Way tag match they had at Money in the Bank, where Gallows was just staring at Cass for 20 minutes.
Well, and I'm with you. I don't think USA would have pulled the plug. They let them go over the time all the time. So,
especially with the Daniel Bryan farewell speech, that went to 11:30.
What were there any other takeaways? SmackDown went live for the first time. There were two things that I'll point out from my end that I thought needs to be done better going forward. The first one would be, we don't need Michael Cole and Byron Saxton part of that broadcast team. There's no reason why Morrow and Lawler couldn't do it, or if they wanted to promote Graves, they could have went that direction. But we don't need to see Saxton 2 times a week, and Michael Cole does not need to be part of SmackDown. Morrow and Jerry could have done it themselves.
You see, I noticed one thing going throughout the show, and I knew it was going to happen since they had the whole entire draft going on. I noticed that the matches were very short. Although they had some good spots in it, it was, and just being surprised on how fast they did matches. If you look, Cena versus Gallows went by like that. There was one other thing I noticed. When they decided to do the rest of the draft on the network, I'm thinking, wait, what if these people don't have the network? Well, how are they going to go and watch it, right? They have to go on Twitter or Facebook Live if someone's live streaming it. But the whole thing on the network was just a mess.
The other thing that I'll give them credit for is we saw for the first time they continued the action during the commercial breaks when the guys were wrestling in the ring, and you would see the match on the left and the commercial on the right, which I thought was great. That was something that they hadn't done before, which I saw as a positive. But, overall, The only thing that I really felt was missing tonight, I like the draft picks for the most part. I don't think you're ever going to get them perfect, but I thought they did a good job with the show. But there should have been somebody announcing the picks rather than Stephanie and Foley and Brian and Shane jostling over the mic. It just felt like very disorganized, and it continued that way on the WWE Network afterwards when Renee's trying to throw to the selections and just running down them like it's not a big deal. They've got to build up a little more anticipation, and I thought they could have done that a lot better.
Yeah, it was just very odd and, like you said, disorganized. I really just thought it was just not done really well. They didn't really prepare for it much. They should have given it a little bit more time, saying, hey, we got to make sure this is all going to be good, make sure we have it done, make sure they should have probably rehearsed it, I guess. So it was just very messy. But the picks themselves, how many picks were there again in the whole beginning untelevised? It was like, what, 25?
Overall, they did 30 on television,
30,
and then they extended after
30 picks on television.
Yep.
Please tell me how the hell Big Show got drafted in the top 30 instead of over, people like Apollo Crews, Zack Ryder, like you said, is fighting for the U.S. title, Darren Young, like all these, some of the NXT people. And speaking of NXT people, so they were saying that people from NXT, like even announcers and stuff, could get drafted. I was actually suspecting one of the 6 NXT draft picks to be Corey Graves coming up to the main roster to do commentary.
Well, and that's the thing. They never drafted any of the announcers, so I'm guessing that's just going to stay as is. There were some surprise decisions like that. Like you mentioned, the Big Show, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, Apollo Crews could have gotten this spot. Braun Strowman could have gotten this spot, who's somebody they've said they want to push. And whether you agree with, Apollo deserves the push more than Strowman or vice versa, the bottom line is Big Show's not going anywhere. So I'm with you there.
Only place Big Show I think is going is either a retirement home or inside a grave. So
if he could just take Mark Henry and Kane with him, I'd be happy.
Oh God, that would free up so much money to sign more guys.
Well, listen, we've got a lot as we continue this podcast into the weeks and months ahead. We'll start diving into some other things such as NXT on a weekly basis.
The Cruiserweight Classic.
Right, that we've got Lucha Underground, which is coming to an end soon, that we've been really into.
Yeah, we're going to probably go over some later episodes since we still haven't caught up, but we'll probably mostly focus on Ultima Lucha.
But everything we're going to be talking about for the most part begins and ends with Raw and SmackDown on Monday and Tuesday night and the news around the wrestling world. So this is going to conclude the first edition of the Barrett Family Podcast. We want to thank you for listening. And also, don't forget they can follow you on Instagram. Where do they get you?
My Instagram is at Dylan's WWE Figures, _between Dylan's, _between WWE, and _ after the figures. I'm really into the underscore if you haven't noticed.
For my main man, Dylan Barrett, I'm Jason Barrett. You've been listening to the Barrett Family Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
This has been the Barrett Family Podcast. To hear previous episodes and to interact with the Barrett family, visit our website at dylanswwefigures.wordpress.com.